Here's what's coming up on the world today. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan gets bail for anti-terrorism court. Russia opens terrorism investigation into Byrd attack. Plus, Ukrainian President Ibrahim Raisi meets with Indonesian President Joko Widodo to boost economic ties. Hello and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Let's begin in Pakistan, where the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail in multiple cases by an anti-terrorism court in Islamabad. He arrived to the court yesterday with his wife amid tight security as he battles corruption charges. His wife, Bushra Khan, joined him and also faces graft charges. The anti-terrorism court granted bail to Khan in at least 8 cases until June the 8th. Mr. Khan, who says the corruption charges have been concocted, was arrested and detained on May the 9th, sparking widespread protest by his supporters and raising new worries about the stability of the nuclear-armed country as it struggles with its worst economic crisis in decades. VOA's Pakistan correspondent Ayaz Gul joins me now for more on this. Thank you very much for joining us on The World Today.
My pleasure.
All right. Let's begin with the former Pakistan Prime Minister. We know he's been granted bail now until June the 8th, and he was granted bail in 8 cases related to violence. What more can you tell us?
Well, yes, there were multiple cases in an anti-terrorism court where he appeared today and was able to secure bail against his possible arrest. And he also appeared in an anti-corruption court simultaneously nearby the same court, where he appeared for the entity to reply to the anti-terrorism charges. And the anti-graft court actually, that's where he spent most of the time today, like almost 2-3 hours, where he was questioned about this allegation of corruption, where this Al-Qaeda trust is involved, and he's being accused of gaining financial benefits together with his wife. But he was able to, answer all those questions, apparently, according to his lawyers, and that's why he left Islamabad for his native eastern city of Lahore, where he has been permanently living these days.
But since Mr. Khan was removed from power back in April 2022, more than 100 cases have already been filed against him by the government. Why is there so much attention on him?
Well, yes, this is a very interesting, in fact, unprecedented in the history of Pakistan, that a political leader is facing so many cases, more than 100, and charges against him. They range from terrorism, sedition, murder, and corruption. And obviously, according to Imran Khan, these cases, because they have been instituted against him after his removal last year in April, the whole purpose, according to him, is to either get him disqualified through one of these cases so that he and his party are unable to contest future elections. And you know that Imran Khan currently, according to all opinion polls, is most popular politician in Pakistan, and his party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party, is the largest political party. And obviously posing a lot of challenges to traditional political parties who are currently ruling Pakistan.
But how are supporters reacting to this? I mean, what's the mood like in the country?
Well, it's something which is very unusual happening in Pakistan, because after the incidents of May 9th, when he was briefly arrested, there were protests all over Pakistan against his violent arrest. But he has been released. Obviously, he was released quickly after 2 days. But what has happened since then is very unusual in Pakistan, because the protesters at that time also stormed some of the military installations. That has provoked the military basically to, together with the government, to launch a nationwide crackdown against Imran Khan's party And what we have seen is that that crackdown has detained thousands of Khan supporters, and most of his central leadership, his party central leadership, has been jailed so far. And in the last 2 days, what we have seen that many of the senior leaders of his party and former parliamentarians have been released from detention, but everyone has come out and left the party, and in fact, in support of the military, saying that the attacks on military installations were condemnable, so that's why they're leaving politics and party. And obviously, critics know that it is out of the coercion that these politicians are leaving. So apparently, Imran Khan, as of today, has been got isolated. So the party that was one of the, in fact, the largest party until a few days ago, and was being predicted to be the winner in next elections, apparently is being diminished or crushed in a way that we may not see this party even participating in elections. I mean, that's the kind of crackdown being witnessed here in Pakistan.
But we understand that Mr. Khan's wife is facing corruption charges in the same case that led to his own arrests. Has she commented on the charges against her?
Well, she's a housewife, and she's a very comes from a very conservative family background, and she has never been to public, but she has been, for the first time, we have seen appearing in these court cases, coming all the way from Lahore to Islamabad, but she hasn't spoken. And Imran Khan, the case that has been instituted against them is a very complicated case. I mean, it's very, according to his lawyers and even independent legal experts, this case will not withstand the scrutiny of any court once a formal proceeding begins, because it's not only Imran Khan and his wife who are involved in this case, but this case also involves the Supreme Court of Pakistan, because the money that he's being accused of receiving through this Al-Qaeda Trust was actually deposited in the account of the Supreme Court of Pakistan when he was the Prime Minister, and he took the decision as the head of the cabinet. So it was a cabinet decision when he was the Prime Minister. It involves the Supreme Court, and it involves also the business tycoon of Pakistan, Riaz Hussain Khan. It's a very complicated case, and many people believe that it's only meant to basically create problems for Imran Khan, and maybe he will be convicted or sentenced in some other cases, but this case has a lot of loopholes in it.
What was Pakistan like before all of this started, before the unrest? I mean, what was the day-to-day living situation like for an average Pakistani?
Well, this is a totally different Pakistan, what we saw until a year ago. We saw when Khan was in power, the country was at least moving forward economically, and there were enough foreign exchange reserves with the central bank. Inflation was not that high. And, even the last year when the current government presented the economic survey, the annual document from the Khan regime, Khan government, it was sort of like nearly 6% GDP growth that survey documented. But what we have seen today is that it's nearly 40%. Inflation has skyrocketed, and it is almost 40% according to official estimates. The Pakistani rupee has received serious beating. It's like more than 300 rupees to a dollar currently, which was like $180, 180 rupees last year. So the inflation and the rapidly depleting foreign exchange reserves, and above all, the current government failure to secure a deal with the International Monetary Fund to stabilize the situation has really led to serious uncertainty about the economic future of Pakistan, and there are repeated warnings that the country is on the verge of a default. But although the government repeatedly says that the country is not going to default, but it has not really come up with a solid economic plan. And the differences with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, still persist. The international lender wants Pakistan to meet its commitments of reforms, which the current government has not been able to do so. So things are very volatile for the government economically, and for the average Pakistani, it has really become very, very challenging living their daily lives here. I mean, it's very, very expensive. Over, whatever we're seeing right now was really not the situation a year ago.
All right, thank you very much, VOA Pakistan correspondent Ayaz Gul. Thanks for your time and your contribution on The World Today.
Thank you.
A judge has entered a not guilty plea on behalf of a graduate student charged with murder in a fatal stabbing of 4 university students of Idaho College. The 28-year-old Brian Korberger also remained mostly silent and opted not to enter a plea during the arraignment hearing in Latta County, prompting District Judge John to enter the plea for him. He wore an orange jail jumpsuit and sat next to his attorney during the brief hearing. The judge scheduled the trial to begin on October the 2nd. But just last week, a grand jury indicted Korberger on 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. He could face life in prison or death penalty if convicted of murder. The U.S. Secretary of Secret Service says that it had detained the driver of a rented box truck that crashed into security barriers near the White House overnight, perhaps intentionally, but there were no injuries or ongoing danger. The witness said investigators found a Nazi swastika flag, which was apparently coming from inside the truck, which crashed into barriers at the square adjacent to the White House grounds. Officers retrieved the flag and plastic evidence bags that had been laid out on the sidewalk following the crash and placed them in the back of the U-Haul. A spokesperson for the Washington Fire Department said a call came in at 9:40 p.m. for what was described as a suspicious package investigation. And still in the United States, President Joe Biden and White House Speaker Kevin McCarthy could not reach an agreement on how to raise the U.S. government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling. Earlier, Mr. Biden said before the meeting started, he was optimistic they could make some progress. But the Democratic president and the top congressional Republican have struggled to make a progress on the deal as McCarthy pressures the White House to agree to spending cuts in the federal budget that Biden considers extreme, and the president pushes new taxes that Republicans have rejected.
Maybe I'll make some progress because we both agreed default's not really on the table. We got to, and the consequence of failing to pay our bills would be that American people would have a real kick in their economic well-being. As a matter of fact, the rest of the world would too. And so we also agree we need to reduce the deficit. And I might add, in my first 2 years as president, I reduced it $7 trillion. It matters. And so I'm all for reducing, continuing to reduce the deficit. And but we both talked about the need for a bipartisan agreement. We have to be in a position where we can sell it to our constituencies. We're pretty well divided in the House, almost down the middle, and it's not any different in the Senate. So we got to get something that can sell to both sides. And we need to cut spending, but here's the disagreement. We have to, I think we should be looking at tax loopholes and making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. I think revenue matters, as well as long as you're not taxing anybody under $400,000. And so we still have some disagreements, but I think we may be able to get where we have to go. We both know we have a significant responsibility. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Speaker. Kevin?
Well, I thank the President for spending time. We had a very productive conversation yesterday, even though he was coming back from the G7 meeting. We do have disagreements. I think we have a 50-year average. We're having more revenue at any time coming in, but I think we both agree that we need to change the trajectory, that our debt is too large. And I think at the end of the day, we can find common ground, make our economy stronger, take care of this debt, but more importantly, get this government moving again to curb inflation make us less dependent upon China, and make our appropriation system work when we get done, right?
In the meantime, Democrats and Republicans have just 10 days to reach a deal until June the 1st that increase the government's self-borrowing limit or trigger an unprecedented debt default that economists warn could bring on a recession. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Kevin McCarthy told reporters after an hour of talks with U.S. President Joe Biden that negotiators are going to get together, work through the night, and try to find a common ground.
They've taken revenues off the table. They don't want to revisit the GOP tax scam. It's exploded the debt by $2 trillion to subsidize the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. They said, no, we can't have a conversation about that. Can't have a conversation about revenue. Can't have a conversation about any policy changes that Democrats would like to have. Does that sound like a negotiation? Or is that a hostage-taking situation? It's a hostage-taking situation, and the hostage is the economy and the American people. And it's time to move in a different direction.
Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate, has formally kicked off his 2024 presidential campaign, betting his upbeat message will sell in a party where many voters are still firmly behind former President Donald Trump. In a speech to supporters in his hometown of North Charleston, South Carolina, 57-year-old Scott emphasized the progress the United States has made on racial issues in recent decades, proclaiming, as he often does, that the U.S. is not a racist country.
We need a president who persuades not just our friends and our base. We need a president. Joe Biden and the radical left are attacking every single rung of the ladder that helped me climb. And that's why I'm announcing today that I'm running for president of the United States of America. But under Joe Biden, our nation is not a nation in decline. But under Joe Biden, we have become a nation in retreat. Retreating from our heritage and our history. Retreating from personal responsibility and hard work. Retreating from strength and security. Even retreating from religious liberty and the worship of God Himself. They say opportunity in America is a myth, and faith in America is a fraud. But the truth of my life disproves their lies. This is the freest, fairest land where you can go as high as your character and your grit and your talent will take you. I bear witness to that. I testify to that. That's why I'm the candidate the far left fears the most. We have the responsibility to share for 1,000 generations what America has done for me, she can do for you. This can't be another presidential campaign. We don't have time for that. We need a president who persuades not just our friends and our base. We need a president that persuades. We have to do that with common sense, conservative principles. But we have to have a compassion for people. We have to have a compassion for people who don't agree with us. I believe the next American century starts today.
Welcome back. In the meantime, New York's top office holders held a news conference where they called on federal officials to expedite the work authorization process for thousands of migrants who have arrived over the past year. New York City Mayor Eric Adams and New York Governor Kachi Hochul spoke from the Industry City Warehouse complex in Brooklyn. Currently, New York has more than 40,000 migrants sheltered.
More than anything, we need changes to the work authorization policies that'll let these individuals not have to wait months and possibly years for that legal status, but let's get it in an expedited basis. So we think it's possible. Right now, you have to wait 180 days after you file for your legal asylum status. That is the big unknown. People come here, they're desperate, they're trying to figure out how to just get on their feet, they don't know the language. And the burden of trying to properly fill out the asylum papers, and then if you're missing something that someone's actually gonna find you to update the application, then at some point you're gonna go see a judge. We don't have enough judges here in the state of New York. So start sending some judges up, and the clerical staff give us the support we need so they can start properly filling out the asylum process.
When I speak with my asylum seekers at the Hercs, at the hotels, on the streets, they state clearly, we don't want your free room and board and food and clothing. We want to work. We want to have an opportunity to provide for ourselves. And right now, we are denying that opportunity by refusing to let them work legally. It is creating an underground market where individuals could be exploited, unable to pay into our tax base, working long and difficult and dangerous jobs because they are living in the shadow of the American dream and not out front. It increases the risk that they can be abused. It is one of the major goals we must accomplish.
Our Washington correspondent Maria Byrd joins me now for more. Hello, Maria.
Good evening.
All right, Maria, thanks for joining us. U.S. President Joe Biden and the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy could not reach an agreement on how to raise the U.S. government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling. Where does this leave the U.S. economy?
This leaves the U.S. economy in a position where we will definitely be able to hopefully get to a deal by June the 1st. We've seen this before. We've had to go all the way till almost midnight the day before the debt ceiling was going to hit. And so it's highly unlikely that Congress will allow us not to be able to reach some sort of agreement. Unfortunately, at this time, we still have a few more days to go. And so both sides are trying their best to ensure that whatever else they want to be a part of that bill is included.
The deadline is fast approaching, as you said, it's just a few days to June the 1st. But Mr. McCarthy has said the talks were productive. But on the other hand, Mr. Biden has said he's optimistic that yet no progress has been made so far. What do you make of this?
I think that because at this time they're still trying to add certain pieces into the bill that each party, President Biden sees that there are a lot of tax loopholes that he would like to close up and include in the bill. And McCarthy is not necessarily buying into those. And there's a clear difference between the way the financial implications for the Republican and Democratic parties, the way they see these implications. And so they're going to try to have each of their sides to come to a finish line and to be a part of the bill. But we know that June the 1st, the biggest piece of this bill is going to be increasing the debt ceiling. And both parties understand the severe ramifications of not coming to this agreement. So it's highly likely that we might be sitting here on May 31st, counting down and not seeing a bill approved till that time.
So is it safe to call this just another talk and less action scenario? I mean, U.S. is already pumping a lot of funds. It announced a few days ago over $300 million has been pumped in terms of fund and military package for Ukraine. But it appears it's already failing to address its own debt crisis.
Yes, in the announcement of the $300 million, there's more confidence. The U.S. is highly expecting to be able to increase the debt ceiling by June the 1st. The President and the U.S. Secretary of State would have not made that sort of a promise if there was not a high likelihood that that debt ceiling would be increased. And you're correct. This is a lot of money that's being pumped overseas and outside of the U.S., especially when you're talking about potentially tough economic times for Americans if we don't see the debt ceiling increased by the 1st.
Speak to us about Tim Scott. He has officially launched a campaign for his 2024 Republican nomination for president. What else do we know?
Tim Scott is putting his name in the hat, and I think that this is potentially a play by the Republican National Committee. This is one that they're thinking he could be a viable candidate. He has always been a strong conservative. He's always been one that is very much in alignment with traditional Republican values. And so they believe that he might be able to bring the Republican Party back to what they feel is a viable party and one that potentially could have a runnings for the White House. So I think this is strategic, not only a desire of Tim Scott, but one of potentially others within the Republican Party and those who are very active within the Republican National Committee.
We know Tim is a Republican, and former U.S. President Donald Trump, too, is also Republican, all in this presidential race. And we know there's still great support for Mr. Trump. But has there been any immediate comments or reaction coming from Mr. Trump?
Mr. Trump obviously is only saying his view as the right view, per se, for at this time. And so he's not going to obviously speak anything positive of Tim Scott at this time. He's going to be pushing his agenda, and obviously his party or his fraction of the party is very different than that of the conservative traditional Republican Party.
All right, I would not expect less. Well, thank you very much, our Washington correspondent Maria Byrd, for your time on The World Today.
Have a great day.
You too. To other stories now, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has met with Indonesian President Joko Widodo to boost economic ties. Both leaders have signed a preferential trade agreement to expand their relations in that regard. Mr. Widodo said they hoped the agreement would increase trade between Indonesia and Iran. Mr. Raisi's visit is coming as ties between the Islamic Republic and the West become increasingly strained following Iranian security forces' violent crackdown on protests against the clerical elite after the death of a Kurdish woman in the custody of morality police just last September. Several countries, including the United States, have imposed broad sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program and alleged rights violations.
Acara penyambutan kenegaraan telah selesai dan saat ini kedua pemimpin akan mengenalkan.
Prince Harry has lost his bid for a second legal battle, a challenge against the Home Office of his security arrangements when in the United Kingdom. The Duke of Sussex was seeking the go-ahead from the High Court to secure a judicial review over a decision that he should not be allowed to pay privately for his protective security. The Home Office, which is responsible for policing, immigration and security, decided in February 2020 that the Prince will cease receiving personal police security while in Britain, even if he were to cover the cost himself. The High Court, which last year already agreed he should be allowed to challenge an original decision to end the protection, ruled that he could not also seek a judicial review over whether to let him pay for the specialist police officers himself. And let's join our London correspondent, Tenny Oyetaya. She joins me now from London for more on this. Hello, Tenny.
Hi, Anne. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Prince Harry has lost a bid legally challenging the British government's decision not to allow him pay for police protection while he is in the United Kingdom. Is this in any way affiliated to the fact that he stepped down in official roles as a working royal?
So I think it's important to understand, as we know, that Prince Harry left his role as a senior working royal. He's not entitled to security or what they call automatic police protection when he or his family are in the UK. It's important to understand that this case is not about whether or not he should have the same level of security as other working royals, but instead whether he should be able to pay for that same level of security since he's not entitled to it anymore. So as you said, the Home Office said in February 2020 that the Prince would stop receiving personal police security while in the UK. Even if like he wants to, he was to cover it, the cost himself. Prince Harry's legal team has been challenging how that decision was made, arguing that it wasn't taken correctly and that there is provision under the Police Act for private individuals to pay for policing. The Home Office argued that it would be unreasonable to expose police officers to danger because of payment of a fee by a private individual. So the judge agreed to that and has now ruled out any judicial review of that decision, basically, which means that Prince Harry will not be able to pay for special police services.
I mean, Tanya, we know how Prince Harry has been very vocal about the security of his own family. Just last week, he, Meghan, and the mother were involved in a near catastrophic car crash with paparazzi, and we know how difficult paparazzi could be. Many wonder if this decision to strip him of publicly funded protection was deliberate, even if he has to pay for it if he wishes to.
And I wouldn't say deliberate. It's more of just one of the consequences of stepping down as a working royal, which Prince Harry, I'm sure, was fully aware of. But yes, he has been very vocal about security, and especially when it comes to protection of him and his family against the media. And just to add that this is actually just one of several legal cases regarding Prince Harry at the moment. He and his wife Meghan have filed at least 7 lawsuits against British and American media organizations since 2019. So there's still a long battle ahead, and really, depending on what side of the fence you're on, the episode last week in which the couple claimed they were chased in New York by paparazzis further shows that why they need that extra security. But then again, people have poked holes in that story, saying it wasn't as bad as Harry and Meghan painted, and it also wasn't in the United Kingdom. So this whole case of extra security doesn't really apply here.
And now, has there been any immediate reaction or comments from Prince Harry himself, or maybe a spokesperson since this development happened?
Well, we've not really heard much from Prince Harry or his spokesperson following this. The last we've heard from them was following last week's claim of that chase, which led to a strongly worded statement. But I'm sure we'll get a response to this development soon. But for now, there's been nothing yet.
All right, away from Prince Harry and all the paparazzi, the UK is going all out in terms of curbing immigration numbers. We're hearing ministers will soon bar foreign students from bringing in their own family members with them to Britain when they're giving like study leave or things like that. What more can you tell us regarding this?
Right, and so this is as anticipated. The Home Office has officially announced that it will restrict the ability of all international students, except postgraduate students, to bring family to the UK. And that also, postgraduate students, is also for certain courses, so it's not everyone. In the new measures released earlier today from January 2024, next year, the Home Office says it will also remove the ability for international students to switch from the student route and into work routes before their studies have been completed, which a lot of foreign students do take on that role to stay in the United Kingdom. It also adds that efforts will be made to clamp down on education agents who may be supporting what it describes as inappropriate applications to sell immigration and not education.
We also know that the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, had also planned to cut the amount of international students, the amount of time that international students can stay in the UK after graduating from 2 years to just 6 months. But we heard today that that bid has been thrown out, so that won't happen. The amount of time that students will be able to stay still remains at 2 years. For some time now, there's been talks about these restrictions and how it will affect international students, especially Nigerian students, who in 2022 had the highest number of dependents of sponsored study visa holders, followed by India. And just to add that, we are expecting fresh figures this Thursday on net migration. And from what we're hearing, that data is likely to show a huge surge in net migration, possibly above the 700,000 that we saw last year. So these measures are in response to that surge and the British government's plan to curb in that surge.
All right. Thank you very much, London correspondent Henyo Itaya, for your contribution on The World Today. Sudan's latest ceasefire now appears to be holding despite early breaches of that deal. It's the first truce to have been formally agreed upon and signed by both sides, but there were reports of airstrikes and clashes in the capital Khartoum as it came into force yesterday. In the cities of Udmurn and Bahri, which adjoin the capital, people say they heard gunfire. The ceasefire will enable the delivery of badly needed humanitarian aid there. Hours before the latest truce was due to begin, the head of the paramilitary RSF, General Hamdan Dagalo, issued a statement asking his troops to defeat the National Army and win the war. United Nations envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, said the monitoring mechanism established for Sudan under a Saudi and U.S. broker deal contemplates publicly attributing violations to the ceasefire. He also said that fighting in the 48 hours prior to the ceasefire taking effect has already violated one of those agreements under the deal. Hours before the week-long ceasefire aimed at allowing delivery of aid was due to take effect, Sudan's army conducted airstrikes in the capital, Khartoum.
It is good that a light monitoring mechanism has been established, which will make it possible to say, and if need be also say publicly, where and when and by whom the ceasefire was violated, if it is violated. Both parties had committed not to seek military advantage in the 48 hours preceding it. That has not been honored. We have seen fighting also yesterday and today. Well, before people quote you and say that it was me saying that, no, I did not speak about an ethnicization of the regional dimension. I did speak about the risk, indeed, of the conflict getting tribal, ethnic, or ideological undertones or dimensions inside Sudan. Let me be very clear here. This struggle, this war, is not a civil war. It is a war between two military formations, between two armies, Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces.
In the meantime, United Nations figures estimates that more than 66,000 Syrians ended up in Sudan after their homeland was torn apart by the conflict since 2011. Many now seek to join the flood of foreigners who have left Sudan in past days, including evacuations organized by their own governments. Fearing a return to that shattered homeland, some Syrians are now stranded between the two conflicts. Major warfare in Syria has mostly stopped, though the country is still divided between government and rebels and Kurdish-controlled zones. And finally, on The World Today, a director, Mohamed Kordofani, has described his presence at the Cannes Festival as bittersweet. He directed the first Sudanese film to be included in the festival's official collection as weeks of fighting in Sudan has driven nearly 1.1 million people from their homes. His film, Goodbye Julia, looks at the effect South Sudan's split from Sudan back in 2011 has had on people's lives. Undermined by racism, war, and political instability, relations between both countries remain tense to this very day. Kodofani says that he hoped Sudan could find peace and reconciliation in the future.
It's a confusing feeling. It's a bittersweet. I feel immensely honored and very happy that the film made it to Cannes, and it's such a great reward to all the crew and the cast and myself included. But at the same time, I feel really bad. I walk the red carpet while people are running away from bullets and bombing, but at least I get to maybe help shed light on what is going on in Sudan. And I just stopped and thought, how can a whole nation want to secede from another nation? So this was clearly not a political decision. This has something to do with more social reasons. And I found myself guilty of this myself because I didn't know any Southern Sudanese, although there were millions of them in Khartoum. But it seems like we have managed to create some sort of an apartheid, even if it's not like formal or announced. But these communities are completely segregated, and this really fuels the problem.
And this is where we end the World Today for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Stay safe.